Yes, welcome. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, my conditioner has not been conditioned, but I'm joined by a very special guest. Very special guest. Y'all know my sis. Uh, she's returning. You're gonna see a lot of her. Superstar journalist, Starrene Rhett Rocque, and the guest of honor here. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Who you be, sir?
My name is Jay Rawls. I'm here all the way live and direct from Columbus, Ohio. OH and a dime. This is what we do. We keep it fine all the time. Oh, you remember they used to do that back in the days ago? That's when you knew they was serious. When they was done, they said, ooh, he meant that.
So this is us commemorating and recognizing the 25th anniversary of this album here by Most Def and Talib Kweli, BlackStar. It's a privilege, man, to have one of the producers from that album on here, and we just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about it. The whole premise of my show is what I did. I created a ranking system for classic hip hop albums because I was tired of all the barbershop debates where people were saying, nah. And so I wanted to give it some structure, some organization, and make it like the ESPN or the Rotten Tomatoes for hip hop, where we really look at some stats and standards instead of just having these wild emotional conversations. Because at the end of the day, music is subjective, right? You're gonna like what you like, but if we're having a conversation about a specific feature, we need to be realistic about a specific feature of what makes an album classic. So I'm gonna try to run you through a list. Me and Starrene are gonna ask you some questions about you yourself, your own journey, and about your thoughts on this album that you had your hand in. All right, and so with no further ado, this is category 1, where we go over the album, the product itself. If you haven't already, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, where you can cop the I Used to Love It t-shirt and leave your own ratings.
Oh, that's cool.
The first dimension that we go over, matter of fact, before the first dimension, I got a Jay Rawls question. Jay, you're a producer and a DJ. You're many things. We're going to get to that later. But first, I'm going to talk about Jay Rawls, the producer and the DJ. What got you into it and who influenced you?
Man, I got into it hanging, on the south side of Columbus with my brother DJ Buka, Dwayne. We just used to listen to music all the time. We was into rock, to be honest with you, at first. So I was a Kiss fan. We would listen to Kiss, that kind of stuff. And then hip hop kind of started coming in and taking over. The first thing we started doing was b-boying. We was breaking and doing that kind of thing. But that wasn't too good on the back for me. Even at that young age, I wasn't that talented like that. So I started beatboxing. Now that I could do. So I was doing that, and my man Dwayne started rapping, and Buka kind of started like he had gotten turntables for Christmas, like '86, and so he was kind of so he was the DJ. I was beatboxing. Dwayne was rapping. Eventually, I started rapping, and then that's how I just got into it, man. Just in the neighborhood, it kept us from doing the bad stuff. Like we, I really wasn't trying to be on the corner or do whatever because we was too busy trying to rap and music, so that's kind of what kept us on that path, and that's how I got into it. So that's 85, 84, 85, 86, 87.
And if I'm not mistaken, one of those people you lost recently?
I did. DJ Buka. Yeah, I did. I just lost Buka a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, rest in peace. Sure.
Thank you.
And so on that note, as we talked about how hip-hop started taking over your life and how you got into it, that naturally takes us into dimension 1 for this album that you're a part of, where we talk about the production. Starrene, I'll throw that to you.
I'm just curious about what was the approach to production, because this album came out in an interesting time for hip-hop. Like I think that was probably like the first period of hip-hop where the popification of it, like it started to get real pop, and you had like the purists and then the people who were just like, let it rock. And then I know that this album was kind of like the tongue-in-cheek answer to that, right? Like real music is still around.
Yeah.
So like what was the approach?
The approach, it really, like the music that I made that ended up on that album wasn't specifically made for that album. It was just what we were doing. See, the whole thing is Kweli was always coming to Cincinnati. See, I went to University of Cincinnati for college. And so I was there And when I was doing music, that scene was real rich. You had Mood, the 5Ds, High Tech with Kweli. You had, my group Lone Catalyst. We weren't like trying to save hip hop or do anything like that. We were just making what felt good. Like kids today would call the music we were making back in the early mid 90s. They call that lo-fi music. We just called it hip hop. It was hip hop. We wanted our stuff to be dope beats, good music, and that was it. It wasn't, we didn't have big chains and flashy suits and, I been around the world and we wasn't doing that. We was just on the block. So we was in college. So that's what we talked about. And that the music that was made with all that. Like I was in that surrounded area. I was learning how to make beats and getting better. And like, they say iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steel, right? That kind of thing. I mean, I was learning from High Tech, Fat John, Jason, like all the dudes in Cincinnati. Dose One was there. We was just making music. So that fit that record. When Kweli asked me to send them some beats for that project, the music fit. That's what we were doing, and that's what they were on as well. And that's where the production came from.
What equipment did you use mostly for your contributions?
Sonic ASR 10. I used that up until about 2 years ago. And then my man OP got me on Serato Studio and Rhetmatic. They showed me Serato Studio, and now that's what I'm using. That's my go-to. But the ASR 10 that's home. That's like, that's my first wife.
Yeah, that's classic.
And my wife tell her, she like,
it's always the ASR 10 or the MPC, the Akai 60. Yeah. So, what was the premise behind that?
So that was me because I was such a big fan of their first 212, and that's how they got the deal. And I thought that would be kind of unique to use when Kweli said, High Tech. So I used his and then on Moses Universal Magnetic, he said, yo. So I did yo. And I just did it, just playing around. And Kweli really liked it. And then he found a little sound clip to put over it, the movie clip. And he put that over there, and that was it. But that was it. We just playing around, have a little interlude.
Got you. Shout out to the other producers on this album, JR Period, 88 Keys, and of course, Mr. Walt and High Tech.
What up? You said JR Period ain't on this. You mean Sean J Period?
Sean J Period.
I'm like, there is a JR Period. I was like, hold up.
There's a DR Period. There's a JR Period.
88 Keys, Sean J, High Tech, Deep Miners, like Geology,
word. Yeah, High Tech, he came to his own on that. But he was already incredible. When I met him, I think he was like 16 or 17, and he was already one of the best. He was grown, we was in college, and he was like this high school kid that was blowing everybody out the water. So I already knew he was destined for greatness. Okay.
So as we use this system on a scale from 1 to 5, and I need you to be as objective as possible. I know there's always going to be a little bias, Rawls. On a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, what would you give the quality of the production on this album? 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest.
Of the beats, I would say maybe a 4. There's some beats on there that, and I ain't gonna name no names. You ain't gonna get me to, but that that was. But that goes to the lyricists that pick them, right? Because the MCs pick the beats, so that's the ones they pick. But it's definitely a strong 4-ish.
Starr, what you giving this for quality of the production, and don't be intimidated because J. Rawls.
I'll give it a 5. I think they did what needed to be done.
Okay. That takes us to the second dimension, dimension 2, the cohesiveness of the album.
What you have to understand about Kweli and Moses, Yasin's dynamic is Kweli is the one that puts stuff together. So Kweli put that whole record together as far as getting people to do beats and getting people, and he'll talk to Yasin and they'll have a conversation. But Kweli is the get it done person. So Qua arranged with Rawkus for us to all fly out to LA to record because Most was in a TV show or something, so he couldn't come to New York, so we recorded in LA. He put all that together, and he did it with the latest BlackStar album. Same thing.
So I guess that comes to a question of sequencing, the way every song follows each other, how up tempo is put next to mid tempo, and even skits, right?
It felt like a documentary. I mean, there was I think in the intro, I think Most calls it a documentary, and it does feel like that. It has that raw kind of feel, but it's streamlined and cohesive.
What would y'all give this on a scale from 1 to 5 for how it all flows together?
I'll give it a 5. I think it flows. Yeah, that's a 5.
Yeah, one thing, the beauty about capturing a shorter album is that you have less space to fumble, right? And most classic albums in general, but especially hip hop, if you stay between 10 and 13, you're pretty safe.
Yeah.
So then Dimension 3 is, and this is a question, you got inside information, but I always ask people, what do they feel the intentional mood and tone of the album was? And it's the mood that the duo was trying to get across. Because we all will get a different mood when we listen, but what do you think the essence they were trying to capture on this album was? And how good of a job did they do?
For me personally, I think they was trying to capture we're the unshiny suit era. We're the unpuffed era. This is what we doing, and you know, because they came from the freestyles in Union Square, you know, in the park. Like there was no cameras and stuff like when they first started. You know, now they superstars, right? It's different. But then it wasn't like that. In fact, they were doing shows at Kweli's job at his bookstore, right? Before they bought the bookstore, that's where he worked. And so they were doing shows there because it wasn't really possible to do a SOBs or, you know, these big clubs. You couldn't, so we just do it. And that's a very hip hop mentality way of thinking, right? It's like, if we can't get it here, well, we'll figure out a way to get it, but we still gonna get it, right? And that's what my next book is about, actually. This idea of a hip hop mentality where you think about, you know, the first pioneers of hip hop, where, you know, they couldn't get into a club because they weren't shaven or they weren't a certain way. They didn't have a certain look, or they didn't have the money. So they would get a refrigerator cardboard and cut it down and tape it down on the floor. And now we got our own dance floor and we good and we don't need you. So that's how I think Most and Kweli was thinking with that album. That album was like, we're going to do what we think is true and what's true to us.
That goes to what you were saying a second ago, Starrene, about just being the popification and being the antithesis of that, countering, right? How good of a job do y'all think they did at executing that on this album, setting that tone?
On that album,
they did a great job.
That was what it was about. There wasn't really anything flashy on that album, I don't think. It was you think a respiration, definition, twice in a lifetime, like this is hip hop. Like they wasn't.
Definition is a song that, like, when I hear it today, it still feels like it's my first time hearing it. Like if I hear it on the right sound system, I go to a street festival or whatever, and that song drops, I feel like everybody in the room was like, yes, like feeling it.
You can't really deny it. It feels good.
Cool. So that's a 5 across the board. I got another J. Rawls question because you just mentioned it. I want to take a minute to shout out JR. Y'all wrote a book together, man.
Yes.
Can you let the people know the title of that book and what prompted that?
Yeah, me and my brother JR, John Robinson, we wrote a book called Youth Culture Power. And the book is about, it's this idea of using and building relationships with students in order to educate them and help them get to the next level. It's really, to be honest with you, because both of us are teachers. And so this idea came from this idea of using hip hop culture and eventually youth culture, because hip hop is youth culture now, right? So using that to build relationships and get to understand your students so that they feel comfortable, you can build trust, build a connection, and you can educate them.
Now, this is John Robinson. Sorry to cut you off. John Robinson, formerly known as Lil Cy, right?
That's Lil Cy.
Yeah, that's a homie.
Yeah, oh, that's the homie. Okay. Yeah, Cy is family. Cy is He you know, did a lot of work with Doom and people like that.
Mhm.
So he's out there.
And so for basically, it's a pedagogy book,
Mhm.
and it's for educators, huh?
It's for teachers. It's for teachers and educators. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, hell, we started like doing professional developments, but I mean, this could work for counselors. It could work for police officers. Like just thinking of how to deal with the public, right? Think about cops, you know, and you see districts that are successful are the ones who are out there with the people, listening to the people, talking to the people. The ones that aren't are the ones that are standoffish, that treat the people like they beneath them. You can't do that. And people do that in the classroom. They treat their students like they're second-class citizens. And then they say, oh, well, they don't want to listen to me, or that I can't teach them, or this and that. Yeah, because they don't respect you, D. And that's what it's about.
We're going to jump back into the album. Dimension 4 is the question of the song distinction versus the repetition of words and sounds. So I'll break this down. We talked about the beats already. Is there any repetition on that end? In the beats, are there any tracks on there where you're like, oh, track 7 sounded like track 9? They use the same bass line. They use the same type of hook. Any repetition there?
Not at all. I mean, all the producers were distinct, had their own style. You know, beat miners don't sound like 88 Keys, don't sound like J. Rawls, don't sound like High Tech, don't sound like Geology, don't sound like Sean J. So nah, that's a 5. There's no repetition on beats.
It feels like they broke up the production for that reason. Like they could have just went all high tech, but they were like, no, let's have different people for that reason.
Yeah,
that's a great point. And then on the word end, does it sound like there's any laziness with the writing? Any points where hooks sound the same, similar words are used for verses?
Yo, yeah, the yes, even the guess. I mean, that's what my man said. Even the guess, the album, the verses. I mean, that might be a 6 on your scale. Like the verses, there's really no. I mean, Kweli and Mos, they was at the top of their game at that time. There was really no. There wasn't. I mean, you know, even Jay-Z said lyrically, I probably be Talib Kweli. Like that's, you know.
I knew the bias was gonna come out there.
I'm just saying. I mean, it's people that people consider their favorite rapper is saying that the rappers on that album might be, you know, one of their favorite. That says a lot. So to me, the lyrics on that album are definitely, there's no repetition.
Yeah, it's almost a stupid question to ask for this album because they were so intentional about putting words together, right? You got Mos saying lines like synaptic space. You're not hearing rappers say things like that.
And Mos was a singer too. He was singing on there too. So.
Right. But the reason this dimension exists is because we get so many rappers that they run out of things to say, and you hear them saying similar stuff. So sounds like this passes that test. It's a 5 for both of y'all.
Yeah.
Okay. So the dimension 5 itself is the question of the amount of songs versus the amount of content. How much topical, substantial stuff is being talked about on a 13-track album? What ratio is that? We get a lot of albums where we get a lot of albums where it's like 15 tracks of bang bang, I'm killing you, and the last track is why they kill my cousin. They got the choir singing. But this is a 13-track album. Topical, substantial stuff. What kind of percentage do you think?
I mean, with this album, man, that's another one of them questions that you already know. We all know the answer to.
We do.
I mean, this album is all substance. Like, there's nothing, you know, I mean, there might be a few lyrics that like, yo, I'm dope, and but it's all like, got you like respiration. I mean, you think of Twice in a Lifetime, you think of like just that's the lyrics.
Knowledge is so.
Knowledge is so. Thieves in the Night. These, come on, man. With 88, that beat. Listen, that song that gives me goosebumps. That makes me feel like when I first heard that at Kweli's crib, and it was like we working on this, and it wasn't done, and it was like the lyrics. Like he talking about Toni Morrison, The Bluest Eye, like just like
that's
you
what I'm saying. The way they drop all those people.
You make you go to the library.
Coltrane.
Come on, man. Incredible.
Coltrane, Toni Morrison, like they were putting people on to stuff outside of hip hop that you might not even thought about.
Correct.
So yeah, for sure.
Sorry, when you, because we were the same age when this came out. Did you peep that was a Toni Morrison adaptation? That
Yeah,
whole first version?
I mean, yeah, you know me. I
Yeah.
grew up. I was a nerd growing up. I used to read all the time. Like I was probably reading Toni Morrison when I was like 10. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of people though that didn't understand.
but a lot of people, yeah,
like
sure.
like Kweli and High Tech's first single was called 2000 Season, which is based on a book by Armin, and that's the kind of like Kweli was having me like read to try to keep up with the hell they was talking. You know, I mean, like Dr. Francis Cress Wellesley, there was a whole bunch of different things that you had to open up a book so you could even be on their level.
Yeah, I think we talked in my second part of this episode, we talked about some of his references coming from the fact that he grew up in a freaking bookstore. So he's
because his people don't know his mom. You know, she's an English professor, head of a department at Medgar Evers in Brooklyn. So
both of them.
He's a product of that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
right. And I think his brother's a lawyer. So I mean, he's a product of education.
Yeah. So he
real
almost,
education.
He almost couldn't help it in some of his bars. Like he's just going into these obscure spaces. But it sounds like y'all both giving this a 5. And like you said, most of us know that. And if there's brag rap songs like Definition, Twice in a Lifetime, for every one of those, you're gonna get Respiration. You're gonna get A Knowledge of Self, 8th Flight Astronomy. So 5 across the board. That takes us to dimension 6, the features. You said somebody in the background already brought it up. We know features can help an album or they can hurt an album. Who we got on here?
Oh man,
it's Common, Wordsworth, Punchline,
Weldon Irvin,
Weldon
Jane
Irvin,
Doe.
Jane Doe. Let me tell you something. As a woman, when I first heard this album and I heard Jane Doe, I was like, who is this woman? I just wanted to know more about her. She just felt so refreshing at that time. To this day, I still think about her.
Yeah, she was around too, like in the Kiru book days. Like that's how I met her.
Wow, okay.
Jean Grey Jean Grey was what? Jean Grey is a producer. That's how I know her.
Right.
Yeah, when she started rapping, I was like, oh, you do that too?
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
That whole crew, like Jean Grey sings, like that whole crew. But yeah.
Jane Doe, I was checking for her too because she had popped up on some of the raucous stuff at that time. And yeah, I remember being excited about her presence on there. Weldon Irvine, remind me which track he's on, y'all.
Did he? The intro
isn't he on the 8th Flight?
8th Flight. 8th Flight.
But he, I mean, they were very influenced by him. Most knew him. I never got to meet him, but he's the one that Tribe Called Quest sampled for Award Tour.
Oh yeah, Weldon Irvine is who Jay-Z sampled for Dear Summer.
And that's the thing, like all the obscure jazz references and stuff, like especially back then, we used to read liner notes, so they put people on to a lot of. I started listening to jazz more because of Most and Kweli.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's not forget Vinia Mojica.
Yeah, of course.
Day one, been down with everybody associated with the Native Tongue camp. and she added a real ethereal component. Just even though she's reciting many Rippards and stuff, it was a nice touch on that track. I always debate, Rawls, I want your raw opinion on this, man. I always felt like Wordsworth had more punchlines than Punchline actually had.
Yo, that's what my people's over here is saying. They kind of agreeing with you. Yeah, I mean, Words is just one of them kind of MCs. He's one of my favorites because I'm still hearing things when Words said 20 years ago. I'm like, oh, that's what I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, Words is incredible.
Yeah, the stereotype punchline, yeah, he killed that. So do the features help or hurt on this album? What y'all giving this on the scale from 1 to 5?
5, man. The features help. The features added, and it was all fam. So I knew everybody on there, so I thought it was great.
Could it be argued that they didn't even need features on this album?
They didn't.
Nah, of course they didn't need features, but it don't hurt.
Yeah,
but they found a good balance. They
help get some people some love. That's kind of part of what it was.
Because actually, I learned about Wordsworth through them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then Words was on the Lyricist Lounge show that would come later, but that's you know, that helped him out, and that also helped him get on the Tribe Called Quest album, Love Movie.
Yeah, it was 1 year later. I was an avid watcher of Lyricist Lounge show. That's where Tracy Ellis Ross comes from.
Me too.
Yeah, and something has to be said to the contrast of voices. I think, you know, having Common on a track like Respiration was the perfect contrast to the two voices of Kweli and Mos.
Nice.
So, all right, sounds like 5s across the board. That takes us to Dimension 7. The question of, does the weakest song bring the album down? We've heard this before, y'all. I always use, my favorite example to use is Nas' Stillmatic, the song Braveheart Party. Everyone hated that song to the point where it got taken off. You won't find it on the streaming version of the album. They took Braveheart Party off. Some classic albums have that one song that can ruin it. But even if we don't have a song that can ruin it, there's always a song we skip. So first, I'm gonna ask you what your favorite song on here is that you didn't produce.
My favorite is Thieves in the Night. For me, that's the best. That's the one.
Easy. So you know, having you on here is a special, is really a gem, because you actually produced me and Starrene's favorite track on this album, Brown Skin Lady.
That's you.
And
it was made from the start. I mean, that's.
I know.
It was about our. I mean, we sat in the lab and talked about that. It was like, yo, our women don't get that shine, and we got. So we're gonna get them a song.
Much appreciated.
What made you flip that Gil Scott-Heron sample, man? Like,
because I used to sit and listen to it in my apartment in Cincinnati, and I listened to it a lot, and I like did that on purpose. The way I chopped it was on purpose, because I knew that song back and forth, because I used to just listen to it because it was dope and what it was talking about, right? You know, the issues in Detroit at that time, man. It was dope.
Whose idea was it to put the movie clip on it? That's Talib?
Kweli, yeah, that's all. Kweli's a movie.
Of course, because that's
all the movies that I even heard of, like I didn't even know about that movie until him. Yo, man, you gotta watch this. I was like,
never heard of it. Chameleon Street.
Yeah, Chameleon Street, and apparently, like, it's supposed to be like a underrated classic.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, like in the black.
He just gave me a couple new movies to check. So yeah, that's how we do. He's a movie buff.
All right, I imagine you might sit this question out, but what's your least favorite? Is there a track that you skip, Starr, if you want to go first?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's any that I skip. It's just I may not listen to it as much as, like, you know, Thieves in the Night. You know what I'm saying? Because that just I just repeat that. The Eighth Light I don't listen to as much. Would be the one for me personally, but I still like it. I still bump it. I still know about it, you know. So I mean, but that's, like I said, that's all subjective. So
yeah, absolutely, it's the most subjective dimension out of all 10 of mine. Rini, what's the track that you skip? What's your least favorite?
Probably Eighth Light.
Okay.
Maybe Respiration from time to time.
What? And Respiration is important.
And I don't dislike either song.
I don't
dislike either song, but those are probably the two that I'm like.
So for me, I usually keep my opinion out, but I'll say Hater Players is probably the one I skip.
Oh, I get you.
I have heard some backlash about a Children's Story remake, because they're like, this was kind of lazy. You didn't need this here. I've heard.
I like it. Yeah.
But I know what they was trying to do with that. But I feel you. I mean, all of those that were named, I could get, except for Respiration.
Yeah. So does it affect the album negatively? On a scale from 1 to 5, 5 means it had no effect. It's perfect. Anything below that means it might have chipped away at it.
See, that's hard to say. Here, I'm gonna say 5, but that's me, because even like if an album, you got a 10-song album and 2 of the songs is the 8 that are all that, if they're all that, I mean, the album's still great for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Like, for me, it doesn't take away.
I would still give it a 5. It doesn't take away, because I don't dislike either song. It's right. I just have to be in the mood. That's what it is. And so sometimes I will listen to them and appreciate.
Got you. So there's no Braveheart Party on this album.
No.
All right. So Dimension 8, Mass Appeal. We talked about this being counterculture, not the pop, the anti-shiny suit. But at the end of the day, you're a signed artist. Even if you're a signed artist on Rawkus, you want to sell units, you want to reach as many people globally as possible. Did this album have the ingredients to do that?
Yeah.
So I'm going to be very honest and tell you, I would give that a 4, and here's why. First of all, for me, it's everything, right? But I'm not the masses, right? You got to think of the masses. The masses are like Taylor Swift, right? Beyonce. That's the masses. This album ain't for everybody. And to be quite honest with you, I like that. It ain't got to be for everybody. You ain't, everybody isn't hip hop, and I ain't inviting everybody to be hip hop. You good. You can be pop all you want. Hip hop is hip hop, and that's a different feel for me.
I think of this group as the mainstream poster boys for the underground, if that makes sense. They were the mainstream I distinctly remember Definition getting radio play.
It did.
And this is 98. This is
that
when
was
you got
probably
Big
the
Pun.
only song on there that did for real get radio play.
And this is 98. You were on the radio with Big Pun, Lauryn Hill, Nori, Cannabis.
They had a video.
Not Cannabis. Cannabis wasn't getting radio play out, but that's what I mean. They did more than Cannabis. They did more for the underground than Cannabis did. They got radio play. They actually got spun in the clubs. That's a huge deal for Rawkus. That's a huge deal for underground. That's a huge deal for both of them individually. New York radio was very divisive, so for them to get that look, Respiration got a lot of video play, so that helped them.
Right, there was a video for Respiration.
I think at the time Common was a better known artist, so his presence helped him in a way. Was it a third single? A third video?
I don't think so.
I think Definition and Respiration was all they did. That's what I think.
And I think this album went gold, did it not?
Man, I don't have a plaque, so they keep telling me no.
Okay.
Oh, so I thought it did. I feel like I heard that somewhere.
I heard it. I asked Quan actually a few months ago, and he said no, it hasn't. I'm like, that don't make no sense to me.
It doesn't.
Right now, we should be platinum, but okay.
But I hope you do know, J. Rawls, that Brown Skin Lady was like the unofficial single. Like that gets played.
That should have been a single for sure.
Yeah. It gets played to this day at the party. So like it lived on like that. So you would give it a 4. Starrene, what would you give it for Massive Bill?
Can I say like a 4.5? And the reason why I say that is because I'm the child of an educator too, and I feel like this album is an album you can play even now. Like it almost functions as a syllabus. Like if you were teaching a hip hop history class or just some kind of music class, and you wanted to kind of discuss hip hop and jazz and the theory and how they kind of intersect, you can use this album as the examples for that. So that's why I would say 4.5.
Wow. That's dope. Have you used this as part of your own educational endeavors, Jay?
I have.
No, I haven't.
Oh, Jay.
Me. Now, Starr has. That's what's up. But I have.
I got a job at a radio station because I knew this album. Like it was the most random thing. When I was in college, I went to audition for the college radio station, and they interviewed all of us, and because they were like, it's cool if you're a personality and you're on air or whatever, but they kind of talked to us about like the music that we know, and I brought this album up, and everybody in the room, and this is in Virginia, and people were from different places. Everybody in the room was literally like, "Oh, she knows that. She knows BlackStar." Like, and so I got hired.
Shout out to Starr's radio resume. Starr used to work with Wendy Williams and Charlamagne and that whole outfit, and she survived it. So, Dimension 9, the 3 I's, the impact, the innovation, and the influence of this album. What can y'all say about those 3 things?
Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, I get 5 across
all day on all 3 of them eyes.
What did they innovate on this album?
I feel like the innovation was, one, if you listen to the beats, right, they don't sound like they're from any specific time. Like even then, they just sounded very unique. Whereas like you can hear a lot of beats from the 90s and call it, oh, that was 98, that was this, that was that. I feel like with that, you not really. So yeah, I mean,
I think the innovation for this was they were going against the grain. You got to think, what was
That too.
98 sounding like? 98 was real shiny suit, real, you know, it was just big. Like, we got
It was
money.
either Shiny Suit or Juvenile and Cash
Yeah,
Money.
yeah, that was coming up too at the time. But Money Ain't a Thing was what it was, and these dudes didn't have money, and they were still shining. I think that was the innovation. And here's the cool thing: they weren't like the only ones doing that. They just was the only ones signed at that level, because there's still other people that was doing it and saying the same thing, because they was all from the same cloth. But they had more of a megaphone.
Yeah, when I think of they made it accessible, and that's what I mean about them being the poster children. They made underground accessible to the masses in a way it was like, oh, maybe this is not as different as we think. Because when I think about who else was underground or Raucus affiliated, then it was kind of obscure, right? You got Company Flow, you got High and Mighty. They're little. You gotta have a taste for that stuff. And then if you go even further underground, you got Cage and 7L and Esoteric and, you know, so these guys, it's like, oh no, they make bouncy tracks too. They make tracks you can party to. They make digestible music. So I think there's an innovation to knowing that we want to be accessible. They even cared enough to do it. And I want to say they weren't angry, but Talib was a little angry on some of his verses.
Hater players.
Yeah, Clarence Carter. Influence. Do y'all hear other rappers talking about this album having an influence?
I think it did influence. I don't know if people talk about it, but I think it influenced.
Agreed.
It gave artists like me an idea to say, yo, I can put stuff out too, and people will buy it, and we can. So there's a whole host of artists that come after that had that confidence.
Yeah, I think maybe it's one of those albums that even if you don't hear rappers saying it, you see the influence later.
Yeah,
right? When I see
like Kweli and most are like the reference. Like whenever they want to try to sound, oh, I want to sound artistic or conscious or whatever, I feel like Kweli and most are the reference, and this album is probably that, even if they don't say it.
Yeah, when I think 5 or 7 years later, Little Brother, Blue and Exile, me and you touched on that in our episode, Starrene, Blue and Exile, you definitely hear the influence, right? So it's there. What do you said? You giving it a 5, Starrene? What you giving it?
I get a 5.
Okay. That's huge. That takes us to the final dimension 10, the overall timelessness and uniqueness. I feel like I already know your answers because y'all have already spoken to this.
I mean, people have been harassing most in Kweli since this came out, right? Like, when is the next one coming out? When is the next one coming out? So that's timeless. That's impact. So I'll give it a 5. 20 plus years later, like every time they would go somewhere before they finally released the follow-up, it still was like everywhere they went, when is the next one coming out? It got to the point where most was like, it'll come out when it comes out.
Here's the answer to your question, real simple. Have you ever heard of an artist called Yomo and Malky?
No.
Okay, there you go. That came out in 1992, produced by Dr. Dre. Dope album, had joints. Y'all don't know nothing about it. But we 25 years later talking about BlackStar, time.
There you go.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, and there's thousands of albums I can name that you'd be like, that came out 25 years, you don't even know what it is. So, I mean, if we're still talking about it, that tells you it's timeless, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, and this question comes up just because there are a lot of albums that when you play it, you cringe. And doing this show, making this system that I created, actually brought that to light. There's some stuff that because of my own nostalgia, I was biased on. But when I had to pop some of those Rakim albums, as much as I hate to say it, Rakim is my inspiration. I was like, ooh, I don't know if I can listen to all 12 of these songs, Rob. So
you can.
So musicality means a lot. You guys really put your foot in that production. You made sure you pull it from timeless music already. You know, Gil Scott Heron is timeless already. So Minnie Riperton's timeless already, or, you know, whatever we're putting in there. And y'all built upon that. That's what's important. Not just taking from, but adding to it. So salute to y'all for what you did. I want to ask you just a couple more J. Rawls questions before we get up out of here. The PhD. I got a PhD in the room, man. What put you on your educational journey to go that far?
It's real simple, man. There's none of this is rocket science, man. I was trying to like do this hip hop and education thing, and I kept getting told no. I kept getting told you can't do it. And one of the things that was holding me back was I didn't have that degree. I didn't have that terminal degree. And so I got that terminal degree, and then all of a sudden, people thought what I was saying was very interesting. This could work. This could blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I was saying this 10 years ago. It's part of the game, right? It's part of the game. So I had to play the game to get to where I needed to go. And that's all it's about.
Wow, you might have just inspired me from this episode, bro. I got my master's in psychology, and I've been playing with getting that PsyD, that PhD, so I can have that moment like you, that KRS moment that I think very deeply, right?
You saying something that makes sense now, but they ain't gonna listen because you don't have that degree. So you can't get certain doors open, and that's all. It's just playing the game. That's all it was. I just played the game.
Damn, that alphabet soup. I had the pleasure of meeting you at the Hip Hop Education Conference. Shout out to Chris and the movement he has out there in the Bronx. And you revealed that you're part of a collective now.
I'm working with the Edvengers. That's me, Fresh Professor James Miles, Wordsworth, and John Robinson. And so we're doing stuff. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna get to that too. Okay. We're doing stuff. Like where we do professional developments for teachers and helping them integrate hip hop into their pedagogy. But the other thing I'm also doing is working with Martha Diaz, Toki Wright, Queen Heroine, and a few others, where we are creating hip hop standards for NAFME right now. So for the music education teachers, we're creating standards for hip hop so that they can teach it in K-12 schools.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's so dope. Yo, J. Rawls, Starrene, do you have any other questions you want to throw in there?
No, I think we covered the bases.
Yo, this is hands down the quickest interview I've done with someone on that side of the table. My interview with Tash was like 2 hours long. He was
Tash
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's we love what you're doing. We love what you've done for hip hop. We love what you're doing for education, maybe even more. Can you let the people know where they can find you and what you got cooking up next?
The easiest way is Instagram at JRawls82, JRAWLS82. That'll keep you up to date on everything we're doing. And then if you're interested in the education side, it's JR.com. So ITSJAYARE.com. And that'll get you all the, the books, different things, professional developments. Any educators want to bring us out to talk to your teachers, we do that too. So holla at us.
And let us know. You're talking to a journalist and a psychologist here, and we're both hip hop experts. So any way we can help and be a part of the movement, let's not make this the last time we're in contact, man. I
appreciate that. No doubt. Let's do it.
And I got to ask you, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, STARR_ROCQUE, Starr Rocque, pretty much anywhere, Starr_Rocque. I've been on Instagram a lot lately these days. So, yeah.
All right. And y'all know what it is. Until next time, F a rap critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.